if you hear the term Platonist applied to a philosopher nowadays, what's being said is that that person believes in abstract objects or abstract entities. Those are interchangeable terms. What exactly is it that these philosophers believe in? What are these things that are called abstract objects? Well, if you ask a Platonist, what exactly is this thing that you say exists? They're likely to say it's an object that exists outside of space and time and that is causally inert. So it doesn't take up any space at all, and it doesn't enter into causal relationships. So it can't cause other things, it can't bring about effects in other things, and it can't be causally influenced by anything. So why exactly do Platonists believe in abstract objects? There are a couple different reasons. One of them we actually encountered when we were studying the pre-Socratic philosopher Parmenides. And it's this: sometimes we say true things, therefore meaningful things, that contain names that don't refer to concrete entities. So, and by concrete, that's in the literature on Platonism. What's meant by that is just not abstract. Okay, so if you pick an example of any physical object, would count as a concrete thing because it's not abstract. And actually, if for example immaterial souls exist, those too would be concrete according to this definition, because most people who believe in souls think that they do enter into causal relationships, and that they do exist in time, and so they're not going to be abstract entities. Anyway, these according to this one line of thinking in support of abstract entities, we sometimes utter true things with names in them that don't refer to concrete things, and therefore they must refer to abstract things. That's the line of thought. Example: Sherlock Holmes lives at 212, or is it 221? I can't remember. Baker Street in London. Assuming I got the number right, let's just say it's 212. Then that's a true statement. So if I said he lived in Bristol or in Puerto Rico or something, that would be false. Whereas I said that he lives in London on Baker Street. So it seems that I said something true, but the name Sherlock Holmes doesn't refer to any sort of physical entity, okay? But in order for this statement to be meaningful, it seems, here's what the Platonist is thinking, it's got to refer to something. Since it doesn't refer to a concrete thing, it must refer to an abstract thing, something that doesn't exist in space or time, that doesn't actually enter into causal relationships. So Platonists will often believe in that fictional characters are abstract things. They're likely to believe that numbers are abstract things. Well, so that's one line of thought, okay? In support of the existence of abstract entities, is that we can give lots of examples of meaningful sentences that contain names that don't refer to concrete things. Okay, pick any true statement about a fictional character and you've got an example. Pick a true statement about numbers. Say that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And it doesn't seem that you're talking about a physical thing. Okay, the number 2, the number 4, these aren't things that you can bump into when you're on a walk. Okay, they don't seem to be physical things. So that's one line of thinking. Here's another. And it's called the 1 over many argument. And this is actually what we encounter in Plato's Parmenides. Okay, we find a statement of the 1 over many argument. What is this? Well, what it says is that objects, we often find that objects have a property in common. Okay, so for example, 2 things can both be blue. 2 works of literature can both be boring. 2 people can both be wise, or 2 people can both be stupid. So we often find that objects have common features. Well, what exactly is going on? How do we explain this, the sharing of a particular feature? Well, according to the 1 over many argument, there's only one plausible way to explain it. And that's this, that property or quality, characteristic, exists, and it's instantiated or exemplified in both or all of those objects that are exemplifying that feature. So for example, if Socrates is wise and Pope Francis is wise, According to the one over many argument, so I'm going to assume that's true. Socrates is wise and Pope Francis is wise. If you're troubled by Socrates thinking, but Socrates doesn't exist anymore, just imagine another person who is alive and who is wise. Okay. Well, according to the one over many argument, the only way to make sense of more than one person being wise is if there is this thing which is wisdom. Okay, it's a property that is present in both of them, that both of them are exemplifying. Okay. Or take two things that are green. Okay, grass is green and the leaves on the trees are green. How is that possible? According to the Platonists, there's only one way that could be possible. There is something which is greenness, and greenness is being exemplified by both of them. So according to this line of thought, according to the one over many argument, there is something, namely wisdom, that's exemplified by different persons. There's something, namely greenness, that's exemplified by different physical objects. And these don't seem to be, wisdom and greenness, things that exist in space and time. Their instances do. They have instances in space and time. So Pope Francis would be, he exemplifies wisdom. But wisdom itself doesn't seem to have a physical location. That's the one over many argument. And Socrates presents that in Plato's Parmenides. Okay, it's a pretty brief statement of it, but we do get a statement of it in the first half of Plato's Parmenides. Now, for this course, we only are reading the first half of that dialogue, and what we get is a presentation of the one over many argument, and then several challenges to it from Parmenides himself. Scholars basically agree that Socrates never actually had this conversation with Parmenides and Zeno, but in this sort of work of fiction from Plato, that's what's happening. Is there's this conversation between a young Socrates, perhaps a teenager, and Parmenides and Zeno. Okay, Socrates has gone to a home where he knows that Zeno is reading a manuscript that he's been working on, and Parmenides is there. And after Zeno, reads his work, then they get into this conversation about abstract entities, which Socrates calls forms. Okay, well, so then Socrates presents this one over many argument, and then Parmenides and Zeno, who are both impressed by this argument from Socrates, present some challenges to it. Okay, I'm just going to focus on a particular category of challenge that Parmenides sort of levels against this one over many argument, and that's a challenge that has to do with the relation between the form or the abstract thing and the instance, the thing that exemplifies it. Okay, there's another kind of challenge that's an epistemological challenge. I've written about that in the notes that I gave you, so be sure to read those notes. I won't mention it here just because the video will get too long if I do that, and you won't watch till the end. So in an effort to keep the video short, let's just focus on this relational difficulty between the abstract thing, if there are abstract things, and the concrete objects, okay, that exemplify them. So what Parmenides says is, yes, Socrates, aren't there just two possible ways that we could understand the relation between the abstract thing and the concrete thing? We might say that whenever, for example, the grass is exemplifying greenness, that all of greenness itself is somehow present in the grass and in the leaves and so on. We might say that when a person exemplifies wisdom, that all of wisdom is somehow present. Alternatively, we could say that only a part of the abstract thing or the form is present in the thing that exemplifies it. Okay, so Parmenides says, aren't those the only two options? Either the particular or the concrete thing gets all of the abstract object, or it gets part of it. So Parmenides says, aren't those the only two possibilities? And Socrates initially says, yeah, those are the only possibilities. Well, Parmenides says either way, whichever it is, we got a problem with understanding this relation. If it gets all of the abstract thing, then in Parmenides' words, that is a fictional Parmenides, the abstract entity, that is the form, would be, quote, separate from itself. Okay? Now, he doesn't actually explain what that means, but I think we get a rough idea that something could, what it would be for something to be separate from itself. And what he's saying is that that's not possible. Something can't exist in two distinct places, non-overlapping places at once. That seems to be the idea. So Parmenides says it doesn't seem like a particular, a concrete thing could exemplify the whole of an abstract object. What if it just gets apart? Okay. So sometimes commentators call these the whole pie or the part pie solutions to this relational problem. So the whole pie theory doesn't seem to work because then the abstract object will be separate from itself. What if it just gets a part of the pie, a slice of the pie? Well, Parmenides says that doesn't seem to work either. Now, why is that? It's because abstract entities, or the forms, are supposed to be, they're not supposed to have parts, okay? They're supposed to be one, as Socrates puts it. They're not divisible. And that actually seems to follow from them being outside of space, okay? If there are parts, if you can divide them up, then it seems that they have, that they are spatial entities. But if they're outside of space, they can't be divided. So according to Parmenides, it doesn't make any sense to say that a particular or a concrete thing could exemplify part of an abstract entity. And Socrates sort of acquiesces and he says, yeah, that seems like a real problem from my view. Then Socrates says, well, what if it's like this? What if the abstract things, the forms, are actually sort of conceptual entities? What if they exist in our mind? So the wisdom, when we talk about wisdom itself, we say that Pope Francis and Socrates are wise. What if wisdom is sort of just a mental entity? Okay, what if all abstract things are just mental entities? Parmenides says, I don't think that's going to work either, Socrates, because you say that concrete things, that particular things somehow participate in the abstract object, in the form, that somehow the abstract property is present in the particulars. Now, if the abstract object, if the form is a thought, is a mental entity, then the particular, okay, that is participating in it is going to be partially a thought. Okay, so for example, if greenness is a thought, okay, just a mental entity, and if the grass is green, then the grass is going to be partly composed of thought. And Parmenides says, as the fictional Parmenides says, that can't be right, okay? And Socrates agrees that that can't be right. What else is there? What other possibility is there? Well, Socrates says, perhaps it's this. Perhaps the concrete particulars actually resemble the abstract things, the forms. In this case, it's not as though there's a part or a whole of the abstract entity that's somehow present in the particular. It's actually that they look like each other in some way. So instances of triangles actually resemble triangularity. So in this view of what the forms are, they actually are spatial entities. Okay, so in this particular view, Plato was actually sort of toying with the view of the forms, according to which forms are not outside of space and time. They're outside of our spatial realm, but there's a separate realm in which the forms exist, and they actually have spatial properties. So triangularity actually is like a sort of triangle. It's just in a different realm. And the triangles in this realm, okay, in this universe, are somehow participating in that form, which is triangularity. They actually resemble it. Well, there are different reasons to be worried about this view, about this this other realm where these abstract things exist. But here's the one that Parmenides mentions. He says, now, Socrates, didn't this whole sort of line of thought about the existence of the forms get started because you said that whenever two or more things share something in common, we have to posit a form that is present in each of them to explain their common feature? And Socrates says, yeah, that's right. And Parmenides says, well, but now you're saying that the particular entities actually resemble the forms. Okay, so for example, triangles here on Earth or in the universe are actually resembling the form of triangularity. And you're saying that's what the relation is. It's one of resemblance. Socrates says, yeah, that's right. But if they resemble each other, then they share a common feature. So for example, triangles, in this, say on Earth, in a geometry textbook or whatever, they have three interior angles that add up to 180 degrees. But triangularity itself, this abstract entity, will also have three interior angles that add up to 180 degrees. So they have a common feature. So by Socrates' own line of thought, we then have to posit another higher level form that is somehow present in each of them to explain how they have a common feature. Now, this is commonly called in the literature on abstract entities and on Plato's Parmenides, is commonly called the third man argument. You have to posit some higher sort of third entity that is present in both the abstract object and in the particular. So we've got a higher level of form. Okay? But that higher level of form is, of course, going to, on this resemblance view, also share features with the lower level form and with the concrete entities. So you got to posit another higher level form and another ad infinitum. So you've got just this infinite series of forms. And Parmenides and Socrates both agree that that's just not plausible, that there are an infinite series of forms. Part of the reason that it's not plausible is that it seems to actually never, it seems to be what philosophers call a vicious regress. And what's meant by that is it actually never ends up explaining the thing that they're trying to explain, how particular entities share something in common. Because in order to explain it, we appeal to an abstract entity, but that lowest level abstract entity doesn't actually explain it. Okay, so we have to appeal to a higher level one, and then a higher level one after that, and so on. So we never actually get to an ultimate explanation. That's what's meant by saying that something is a vicious explanatory regress, is that the explanation is never actually arrived at. So they end up by saying, look, I just don't understand the relation between abstract entities, between forms and in Socrates' language, and the particulars that exemplify them, and yet both Parmenides and Socrates agree that they shouldn't give up on the view that forms exist. Why is that? Because they think that when we're doing philosophy, that's chiefly what we're doing, is studying abstract forms. So in the Republic, for example, they're trying to figure out what justice is. Not what justice in a particular state or a particular person is, but what justice in general is. In the Euthyphro, when they study piety, it seems that they're trying to study an abstract thing, a form. Okay, rather than just piety in particular individuals, they're studying piety itself. And so what they both sort of tentatively conclude is that the forms must exist, because that's what we're studying when we're doing philosophy. And yet, we've got a puzzle in understanding how these forms relate to the concrete objects that supposedly exemplify them.